Welcome. Tonight, we delve into the shadowy corners of the human heart, exploring the unsettling truths that often underpin our most cherished emotion, love. What we believe to be pure and unconditional can, at times, be a complex tapestry woven with psychological biases, primal instincts, and even self-deception. Prepare to have your perceptions challenged as we uncover the disturbing psychological facts about love. 1. People often fall in love with versions of others that never existed. It's a phenomenon as old as romance itself, yet one that continues to bewilder and wound countless individuals. The profound, often agonizing realization that the person you've fallen deeply in love with, the individual you've poured your heart and soul into, is not, in fact, the person who actually exists. This isn't merely a minor misunderstanding or a slight misjudgment. It is a fundamental, often unconscious, act of creating an idealized phantom, a meticulously constructed mental image that bears only a superficial resemblance to the flesh and blood standing before you. The disturbing truth lies in the fact that our capacity for love, in its nascent stages, is often less about recognizing and appreciating another's true self, and more about projecting our deepest desires, our unfulfilled needs, and our most fervent fantasies onto an unwitting recipient. Consider the initial sparks of attraction. When we first encounter someone who captivates our attention, our brains immediately begin to fill in the blanks. We possess limited information: a charming smile, an intriguing anecdote, a shared laugh. And from these sparse data points, our minds, eager for connection and meaning, construct an elaborate narrative. This narrative isn't purely objective. It's heavily influenced by our own personal history, our past hurts, our aspirations, and even the romantic archetypes we've absorbed from literature, film, and societal expectations. We might see a quiet individual and imbue them with profound depth and mystery, projecting onto them the intellectual curiosity we crave. We might encounter someone who displays a fleeting act of kindness and immediately assign them the role of the compassionate, unwavering protector we've always yearned for. The actual person might be quiet because they're shy, or kind because they're simply polite. But our internal projector casts a much grander, more specific shadow. This projection is a powerful cognitive bias, a form of wish fulfillment that allows us to bypass the uncomfortable complexities and uncertainties inherent in getting to know another human being. It's easier, in a way, to fall in love with a perfect construct than with an imperfect reality. During the intoxicating honeymoon phase of a relationship, this illusion is often sustained and even reinforced. Both individuals, eager to impress and to be loved, tend to present their best selves, highlighting their strengths and downplaying their flaws. This period of heightened positivity and mutual admiration acts as a powerful amplifier for the projected image. Every small gesture of affection, every shared moment of laughter is interpreted through the lens of our preconceived ideal, confirming our belief that this person is the one, the embodiment of everything we've ever sought. Our brains, flooded with dopamine and oxytocin, are less inclined to critical analysis and more prone to romanticized interpretation. The disturbing aspect arises when the inevitable cracks begin to appear in this meticulously crafted facade. As time progresses, as intimacy deepens, and as the initial rush of infatuation subsides, the true dimensions of the other person begin to emerge. Their quirks, their insecurities, their less appealing habits, their fundamental differences in values or aspirations, these elements, once overlooked or dismissed as charming eccentricities, now loom larger. The profoundly deep individual might turn out to be merely reserved and lacking initiative. The unwavering protector might reveal a streak of insecurity or a tendency to avoid confrontation. the idealized version starts to clash with the lived reality, creating a profound sense of cognitive dissonance and emotional betrayal. This betrayal, however, is not necessarily inflicted by the partner. It is often a betrayal of our own making, a consequence of our self-deception. We feel betrayed not because the other person changed, but because they ceased to be the person we imagined them to be. The pain of this disillusionment can be excruciating, akin to mourning the loss of someone who never truly existed, outside the confines of our own mind. It forces us to confront not only the reality of our partner, but also the reality of our own subconscious needs and the often unrealistic expectations we place upon others. Furthermore, this phenomenon speaks to a deeper vulnerability within the human psyche, our desperate longing for connection and completion. We often seek in others what we feel is lacking within ourselves. If we struggle with self-worth, we might project an image of unwavering confidence and admiration onto a partner, hoping they will fill that void. If we feel adrift, we might imagine a partner who is a steadfast anchor. When these projections inevitably fail to materialize in the real person, the initial sense of being complete or saved crumbles, leaving us feeling more exposed and incomplete than before. The difficulty in navigating this realization is compounded by the emotional investment already made. To admit that you've fallen in love with a phantom requires acknowledging a fundamental error in judgment, a substantial emotional miscalculation. This can be deeply unsettling to one's self-perception, leading many to cling desperately to the idealized image, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. They might rationalize their partner's flaws, make excuses for their behavior, or continually try to fix them, all in an attempt to force the real person to conform to the beloved illusion. This can lead to prolonged periods of unhappiness, resentment, and a cycle of disappointment, as the gap between expectation and reality widens. Ultimately, the disturbing psychological fact that people often fall in love with versions of others that never existed highlights the profound self-referential nature of early romantic love. It reveals how much of our initial affection is rooted in our own internal landscape, our hopes, fears, and desires, rather than a clear-eyed appreciation of another's true essence. It's a poignant reminder that genuine love, the kind that endures, requires dismantling these projections, confronting reality, and choosing to love the complex, imperfect human being who actually stands before you, rather than the flawless dream you once superimposed upon them. The journey from projection to genuine acceptance is often fraught with pain, but it is the only path to a love that is truly real. 2. The brain treats heartbreak like physical pain. The shattering agony of a broken heart is a universal human experience, cutting across cultures, ages, and backgrounds. It's a pain so visceral, so encompassing, that it often feels as though a physical wound has been inflicted upon the very core of one's being. For centuries, this sensation was relegated to the realm of poetic metaphor, an emotional suffering described in terms of a stabbing heart or a gut-wrenching despair. However, modern neuroscience has unveiled a disturbing truth. The brain doesn't just feel like heartbreak is physical pain. In many crucial ways, it treats it as such. The neural pathways activated during emotional rejection and loss bear striking similarities to those involved in processing bodily injury, blurring the lines between the psychological and the physiological in a profoundly unsettling manner. When we experience a significant romantic loss, a breakup, a betrayal, the death of a beloved partner, the emotional impact is immediate and profound. We often report symptoms that mirror physical ailments: a tightness in the chest, a hollow ache in the stomach, a pervasive sense of fatigue, disrupted sleep, and a loss of appetite. These aren't mere psychological manifestations, they are genuine physiological responses orchestrated by the brains. Studies utilizing functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, have provided compelling evidence for this connection. When individuals who have recently experienced a painful breakup are shown images of their ex-partner or are asked to recall the rejection, their brains exhibit activity in regions typically associated with physical pain processing. Specifically, areas like the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, and the insula, which are known to be involved in the sensory and affective components of physical pain, show heightened activation. The ACC, for instance, plays a critical role in detecting conflicts, monitoring errors, and processing the emotional aspects of pain. When you accidentally touch a hot stove, the ACC is part of the circuit that registers the unpleasantness and triggers a withdrawal response. Similarly, when you experience the sting of rejection, the ACC lights up, signaling that something is profoundly wrong and emotionally distressing. The insula, on the other hand, is crucial for integrating sensory information and generating subjective emotional experiences, including the feeling of pain, disgust, and sadness. Its activation during heartbreak suggests that the brain is indeed experiencing a form of internal distress that is processed with the same neural machinery used for physical harm. This neurological overlap explains why heartbreak can feel so intensely painful, why it can incapacitate individuals to the same degree, if not more, than a physical injury. Just as a broken leg prevents you from walking, a broken heart can prevent you from functioning normally, from working, socializing, or even performing basic self-care tasks. The brain, in its attempt to alert the organism to potential harm and motivate corrective action, is sending out powerful distress signals, regardless of whether the threat is a broken bone or a shattered relationship. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes a certain kind of sense. Humans are profoundly social creatures, and our survival historically depended on strong social bonds. The pain of social exclusion or loss would have served as a powerful motivator to maintain those bonds, much like physical pain motivates us to avoid bodily harm. The brain, therefore, evolved to register social pain with the same urgency as physical pain, recognizing that both could be existential threats. Moreover, the brain's response to heartbreak isn't just about pain. It's also about withdrawal and craving, mirroring the pattern seen in addiction. When a relationship ends, the brain experiences a sudden deprivation of the love drugs, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin. Dopamine, in particular, plays a crucial role in reward and motivation. The anticipation and experience of love flood the brain with dopamine, creating a powerful sense of pleasure and attachment. When this supply is abruptly cut off, the brain goes into a state of withdrawal, leading to intense cravings for the lost connection. This craving, much like the craving for an addictive substance, can manifest as obsessive thoughts, an inability to focus on anything else, and a desperate yearning to reconnect with the source of the lost reward. This further exacerbates the feeling of distress and contributes to the overall pain experience. The implications of this neuroscientific understanding are profound. It validates the subjective experience of those suffering from heartbreak, affirming that their pain is not all in their head, but a genuine biologically rooted phenomenon. It also suggests that some of the coping mechanisms we employ for physical pain might have analogs in dealing with emotional pain. For instance, just as we might take pain relievers for a headache, some studies have shown that even over-the-counter pain medications like acetaminophen can slightly reduce the distress associated with social rejection, although this is not a recommended long-term solution, and highlights the depth of the neural overlap. Understanding that the brain treats heartbreak like physical pain also helps explain why recovery can be so challenging and why it often follows a trajectory similar to healing from a physical wound. There's an acute phase of intense pain, followed by a period of gradual recovery, often with setbacks and lingering sensitivity. Just as a physical injury requires time, rest, and care to heal, so too does a broken heart. It demands patience, self-compassion, and often the support of others. Rushing the process or denying the depth of the pain can hinder healing. In essence, the disturbing psychological fact that the brain treats heartbreak like physical pain strips away any romanticized notions of emotional suffering, revealing it as a raw, primal response deeply embedded in our biological architecture. It underscores the profound interconnectedness of our minds and bodies, and it offers a scientific lens through which to view one of life's most devastating experiences, acknowledging its profound reality and validating the intense suffering it inflicts. The pain of a broken heart is not merely metaphorical. It is, in a very real sense, a wound that the brain registers and responds to with the same urgency as a physical injury. 3. Love triggers the same chemical pathways as addiction. The intoxicating rush of new love, the obsessive thoughts, the intense cravings for your partner's presence, the withdrawal symptoms when they're absent, these aren't just poetic descriptions of romantic infatuation. They are, in fact, remarkably similar to the neurochemical and behavioral patterns observed in various forms of addiction. This disturbing psychological truth reveals that love, in its most intense manifestations, taps into the very same reward systems in the brain that are hijacked by substances like cocaine, opioids, and nicotine, or by compulsive behaviors like gambling. The implications are profound, suggesting that our deepest emotional connections can, at times, function as a powerful, albeit socially sanctioned, form of dependency. At the heart of this connection lies dopamine, the neurotransmitter often dubbed the pleasure chemical. While dopamine is involved in pleasure, its primary role is more accurately described as driving motivation, reward-seeking behavior, and learning. When we engage in activities crucial for survival, eating, drinking, sex, our brains release dopamine, reinforcing these behaviors and making us want to repeat them. Addictive substances and behaviors hijack this ancient system, flooding the brain with dopamine and creating an artificial yet intensely powerful reward signal. In the early stages of romantic love, something remarkably similar occurs. The mere thought of a beloved, the anticipation of their presence, their touch, their voice, all these stimuli can trigger a surge of dopamine in key brain regions, particularly the ventral tegmental area, VTA, and the nucleus accumbens, which form the core of the brain's reward system. This dopamine rush creates the euphoric high, the intense focus, and the boundless energy characteristic of being madly in love. It's this chemical cascade that makes lovers feel invincible, makes every moment with their partner feel extraordinary, and makes them crave more. The brain essentially learns that this specific person is a highly potent source of reward, and it becomes intensely motivated to seek out and maintain that reward. The parallels with addiction extend beyond just dopamine. Love also involves the release of other neurochemicals that contribute to its addictive qualities. Norepinephrine, a stress hormone, contributes to the heightened arousal, rapid heart rate, and sleeplessness often experienced in new relationships, mirroring the physiological activation seen in stimulant use. Serotonin levels can fluctuate, sometimes dropping, which can contribute to the obsessive thinking and intrusive thoughts about the beloved, a pattern reminiscent of obsessive-compulsive disorder, which we'll touch on later, and also seen in certain addictive states. Furthermore, the attachment hormone oxytocin, while fostering bonding and trust, can also contribute to dependency. When we bond deeply with a partner, oxytocin creates feelings of comfort and security, making their presence feel essential for well-being. The absence of this comfort, when a partner is away or a relationship ends, can induce a profound sense of longing and distress, akin to withdrawal. This is where the darker side of love's addictive nature truly manifests. When a relationship ends, particularly unexpectedly, the brain experiences a sudden and severe deprivation of these powerful neurochemicals. This abrupt cessation of the drug, the partner, and the love they provided plunges the individual into a state of acute withdrawal. This withdrawal manifests as intense emotional pain, anxiety, depression, irritability, and a profound yearning for the lost connection. The craving for the ex-partner can be overwhelming, leading to desperate attempts to reconnect, obsessive rumination, and an inability to focus on anything else. The brain, accustomed to the constant stimulation and reward, is now in distress, actively seeking to restore the chemical balance. This is why heartbreak can feel so physically debilitating. As discussed in the previous point, the body and mind are literally going through a form of detoxification. The addictive nature of love also explains why some individuals remain in unhealthy or toxic relationships. Just as an addict might return to a harmful substance or behavior despite negative consequences, someone deeply entangled in an emotionally addictive love might find it incredibly difficult to leave a partner who causes them pain. The intermittent reinforcement, moments of intense affection interspersed with periods of neglect or abuse, can be particularly potent, strengthening the addictive cycle. The brain learns to associate the partner with both pleasure and pain, but the memory of the high can overshadow the negative experiences, keeping the individual trapped in a cycle of hope and disappointment. The fix of a loving gesture, even a small one, can temporarily alleviate the withdrawal symptoms, reinforcing the pattern of staying. This understanding doesn't diminish the beauty or importance of love, but it does add a layer of complex and disturbing insight. It suggests that while love is essential for human flourishing, its neurochemical underpinnings can render us vulnerable to powerful, sometimes irrational compulsions. It highlights the biological imperative behind our intense desire for connection and the profound distress we experience when that connection is severed. Recognizing love's addictive qualities can empower individuals to understand their emotional responses more clearly, especially during times of relationship turmoil or loss. It underscores the need for self-awareness, healthy coping mechanisms, and the development of internal resources rather than relying solely on another person to fulfill fundamental emotional and neurochemical needs. The disturbing truth is that the path to love, while often beautiful, can also be a neurochemical trap, binding us with invisible yet incredibly powerful chains of dependency. 4. Couples mirror each other unconsciously to gain approval. Observe any deeply connected couple, especially in the early stages of their relationship or during moments of intense bonding, and you'll likely witness a subtle, almost imperceptible ballet. One partner crosses their legs, and moments later, the other follows suit. One leans forward with an eager expression, and their counterparts subtly adjust their posture to match. Their vocal tones might synchronize, their gestures become similar, and even their breathing can fall into a shared rhythm. This phenomenon, known as mirroring or mimicry, is far from a mere coincidence or a charming quirk of intimacy. It is a profound, often unconscious psychological mechanism, a disturbing truth that reveals our innate desire to gain approval, foster rapport, and solidify connection through nonverbal means, even at the cost of genuine individual expression. At its core, mirroring is a powerful social lubricant, a deeply ingrained behavior that operates largely beneath the radar of conscious awareness. It's a form of nonverbal communication that signals empathy, understanding, and alignment. When we mirror another person's posture, gestures, or facial expressions, we are, in essence, subtly telling them, "I am like you, I understand you, I am with you." This unconscious mimicry is not limited to romantic relationships. It's prevalent in friendships, professional interactions, and even brief social encounters. However, its intensity and frequency are significantly amplified in romantic partnerships, particularly when the desire for acceptance and deep connection is at its peak. The psychological drive behind this mimicry is rooted in our fundamental need for belonging and social validation. From an evolutionary perspective, being part of a group, being accepted by a mate, was crucial for survival and reproduction. Our brains evolved to detect and respond to cues that signal social inclusion. Mirroring serves as one such cue. When a partner mirrors us, it creates a sense of familiarity and comfort, reducing perceived threat and fostering trust. Conversely, when we mirror our partner, we are actively, albeit unconsciously, working to elicit a similar positive response from them. We are trying to make them feel understood and liked, which in turn increases their positive regard for us. It's a reciprocal loop of subconscious social engineering. In the context of love, this drive for approval takes on a particularly potent form. During the initial phases of infatuation, when individuals are actively trying to win each other over, mirroring becomes a potent tool. Each partner is subconsciously attempting to demonstrate compatibility and create a harmonious connection. They might unconsciously adopt each other's speech patterns, use similar phrases, or even mimic their partner's unique mannerisms. This isn't necessarily a calculated deception. It's a natural, almost automatic response driven by the deep-seated desire to be seen as a suitable, desirable mate. The disturbing aspect lies in the fact that this mimicry can sometimes obscure genuine differences in personality or preferences, creating an illusion of perfect alignment that might not truly exist. As relationships mature, mirroring continues to play a role, albeit often more subtly. It contributes to the feeling of being in sync with a partner, the comfortable rhythm that develops between long-term couples. When one partner is distressed, the other might unconsciously adopt a similar posture or facial expression, not out of explicit imitation, but out of a genuine empathic response that is partly expressed through mimicry. This can deepen emotional connection and reinforce the bond. However, the disturbing element emerges when this unconscious drive for approval outweighs genuine self-expression. In some cases, individuals might suppress their own natural behaviors, opinions, or emotional responses to conform to a partner's patterns. This isn't always malicious. It can be an unconscious effort to maintain harmony, avoid conflict, or simply to ensure continued acceptance. For example, if one partner is naturally more reserved in their gestures, but their beloved uses expansive hand movements, the reserved partner might, without realizing it, start to use more expressive gestures themselves. While this can foster connection, it can also lead to a gradual erosion of individual authenticity. The constant unconscious striving for approval through mimicry can also lead to a blurring of individual identities within a couple. Over time, partners might find it difficult to discern where one personality ends and the other begins, not because of profound spiritual union, but because they have spent so much time subconsciously adapting their nonverbal cues to each other. This can be particularly problematic if one partner is more dominant or has stronger nonverbal habits, potentially leading the other to conform more extensively, losing touch with their own unique expressions and preferences. The implication is that a significant portion of what we perceive as chemistry or natural compatibility in a relationship might in part be a result of this intricate, unconscious dance of mirroring. While it serves a crucial function in building rapport and fostering intimacy, it also highlights our fundamental vulnerability to social influence and our deep-seated need to be accepted. The disturbing truth is that our love for another can unconsciously modify our very expressions of self, all in the service of ensuring that the bond remains strong and the approval is continually granted. It's a silent, powerful testament to the lengths our psychology will go to secure and maintain the connections we deem vital for our emotional well-being. 5. Romantic obsession activates the same brain regions as OCD. The intense, all-consuming nature of romantic obsession is a phenomenon many have experienced, at least fleetingly, during the throes of infatuation or after a painful breakup. It's characterized by intrusive thoughts about the beloved, compulsive checking of their social media, and an inability to focus on anything else, and a profound sense of anxiety or distress when not in their presence or when their affection is uncertain. While often romanticized in popular culture, this state of mind, when taken to an extreme, is far from healthy. The disturbing psychological truth is that the brain mechanisms underlying severe romantic obsession bear a striking resemblance to those involved in OCD, revealing a darker, more pathological side to our capacity for love. OCD is a debilitating anxiety disorder characterized by two main components: obsessions, recurrent, persistent, unwanted thoughts, urges, or images that cause distress, and compulsions, repetitive behaviors or mental acts that an individual feels driven to perform in response to an obsession or according to rigid rules. Common examples include obsessive fears of contamination, leading to compulsive hand-washing, or intrusive thoughts of harm, leading to repetitive checking behaviors. The brain circuitry implicated in OCD involves areas related to fear, reward, habit formation, and error detection, particularly the orbitofrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, the striatum, and the thalamus. These regions form a loop that can become dysregulated, leading to persistent, anxious thoughts and ritualistic behaviors aimed at neutralizing that anxiety. When individuals experience intense romantic obsession, their brains show activity in many of these same regions. The intrusive thoughts about the beloved, the constant rumination over their actions or words, the desperate need for reassurance, and the compulsive behaviors like repeatedly checking their phone for messages, stalking their online profiles, or driving past their house, all these mirror the obsessive-compulsive cycle. The obsession is the beloved, their perceived affection, or the fear of their loss. And the compulsions are the ritualistic behaviors, aimed at gaining reassurance, reducing anxiety, or maintaining a connection. For instance, the orbitofrontal cortex, involved in decision-making and reward, can become hyperactive in both OCD and romantic obsession, leading to an inability to disengage from the object of obsession. The anterior cingulate cortex, involved in error detection and conflict monitoring, might be overactive, continually signaling that something is wrong or incomplete regarding the relationship, driving the obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors. The striatum, crucial for habit formation and reward, reinforces the compulsive behaviors, making them feel like temporary relief, even if they are ultimately unhelpful or self-destructive. The neurochemical underpinnings also show parallels. While dopamine drives the reward-seeking behavior in both love and addiction, as discussed previously, disruptions in serotonin pathways are also implicated in OCD. Low serotonin levels are often associated with heightened anxiety and obsessive thinking. In intense romantic obsession, similar serotonin dysregulation may contribute to the persistent, intrusive thoughts and the difficulty in shifting attention away from the beloved. The disturbing nature of this connection lies in several aspects. Firstly, it pathologizes what is often dismissed as mere intense love or passion. While a certain degree of focused attention is normal in romantic love, when it crosses into obsession, it can become psychologically debilitating, eroding an individual's well-being and impairing their functioning. The obsessive individual becomes trapped in a cycle of anxiety and compulsive behaviors, their life increasingly revolving around the object of their fixation. Secondly, it highlights the vulnerability of the human brain to become fixated on a single source of perceived reward or security. Just as someone with OCD might be trapped by a fear of contamination, someone romantically obsessed can be trapped by the fear of losing their beloved or by an overwhelming need for their validation. This intense focus can lead to a loss of perspective, an inability to recognize red flags, and a tendency to interpret ambiguous cues in a way that fuels the obsession. Thirdly, it underscores the potential for love to morph from a healthy reciprocal connection into a psychologically unhealthy dependency. When love becomes an obsession, it ceases to be about mutual growth and shared experience, and instead becomes a desperate, anxious pursuit of a fix that temporarily alleviates profound internal distress. The object of obsession is no longer viewed as a whole person, but as a means to an end, the end being the alleviation of one's own anxiety and the fulfillment of one's own intense needs. Understanding this parallel with OCD is crucial for recognizing when intense romantic feelings cross the line into obsession. It suggests that therapeutic approaches used for OCD, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and exposure and response prevention, ERP, might offer insights into helping individuals struggling with romantic obsession. These approaches focus on challenging intrusive thoughts and gradually reducing compulsive behaviors, aiming to break the cycle of anxiety and fixation. Ultimately, the disturbing psychological fact that romantic obsession activates the same brain regions as OCD serves as a stark reminder that even our most profound and seemingly positive emotions can, under certain conditions, become distorted and lead to significant psychological distress. It reveals the fragile line between passionate devotion and pathological fixation, urging us to cultivate self-awareness and seek balance in our emotional lives, lest love become a prison rather than a source of freedom and connection. 6. People ignore red flags because dopamine distorts judgment. The beginning of a new romance is often characterized by a heady, exhilarating rush, a feeling of being on top of the world. The world seems brighter, music sounds sweeter, and every interaction with the new beloved feels charged with electric possibility. During this intoxicating phase, known as the honeymoon period or limerence, individuals frequently overlook or actively rationalize alarming behaviors and inconsistencies in their partner, the infamous red flags. This isn't merely a lapse in judgment or a conscious act of denial. It's a profound psychological phenomenon rooted in the brain's powerful reward system, where the neurotransmitter dopamine plays a central, disturbing role in distorting our perception and overriding our critical faculties. Dopamine, as previously discussed, is the brain's primary motivator and reward chemical. It's released not just when we experience pleasure, but crucially, in anticipation of pleasure. The novelty of a new romance, the excitement of potential connection, and the intermittent reinforcement of affection and attention from a new partner all trigger massive surges of dopamine. This chemical cascade creates an intense feeling of euphoria, heightened energy, and a focused, almost obsessive attention on the beloved. The brain essentially learns that this new person is a potent source of reward, and it becomes highly motivated to seek out and maintain this connection. The disturbing aspect is that this dopamine-fueled state effectively blinds us to potential dangers. When the brain is flooded with dopamine, its capacity for critical evaluation and rational assessment is significantly impaired. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions like judgment, impulse control, and long-term planning, becomes less active. Instead, the reward pathways dominate, creating a powerful bias towards positive interpretation. Any information that contradicts the desired narrative, that this person is wonderful, that this relationship is perfect, that this is the one, is either dismissed, reinterpreted, or simply not registered with the same weight. Consider a scenario. A new partner consistently cancels plans at the last minute, offers vague excuses, or displays a pattern of subtle dishonesty. In a normal, non-dopamine addled state, these behaviors would likely trigger alarm bells, prompting caution or even withdrawal. However, when under the influence of romantic dopamine, these red flags are often rationalized away. They must be really busy. They're just a little forgetful. It's not a big deal. Everyone makes mistakes. The brain, craving the next hit of connection and affirmation, actively seeks to preserve the positive illusion. Even if a fleeting moment of doubt arises, the sheer intensity of the positive feelings quickly overwhelms it. The reward of the partner's charm, affection, or even just their mere presence is so potent that the brain prioritizes maintaining that reward over critically evaluating potential threats. This distortion of judgment is further exacerbated by the brain's natural tendency towards confirmation bias. Once we've formed a positive impression of someone, we actively seek out and give more weight to information that confirms that impression, while downplaying or ignoring information that contradicts it. The dopamine rush amplifies this bias, making us selectively perceive only the good, the charming, the compatible, while effectively filtering out anything that suggests incompatibility or danger. We construct a narrative of perfection, and our brains work tirelessly to maintain that narrative, even in the face of glaring inconsistencies. The consequences of ignoring red flags due to dopamine distortion can be devastating. It can lead individuals into relationships with partners who are emotionally unavailable, manipulative, abusive, or fundamentally incompatible. By the time the dopamine levels naturally begin to normalize, typically after the initial infatuation phase, ranging from a few months to a couple of years, the individual may be deeply invested in the relationship, emotionally, socially, and even financially. At this point, the red flags, once dismissed, become glaringly apparent and far more difficult to extricate oneself from. The realization that one has overlooked significant warning signs can lead to profound regret, self-blame, and a painful reckoning with the true nature of the relationship and the partner. This disturbing fact also highlights the vulnerability of human judgment when confronted with powerful emotional and neurochemical rewards. It suggests that our capacity for rational decision-making in matters of the heart is not as robust as we might believe. The brain, in its ancient drive for connection and reproduction, can temporarily override our more sophisticated cognitive functions, leading us down paths that might ultimately be harmful. Understanding that dopamine distorts judgment is not about advocating for cynicism in love, but rather for cultivating self-awareness and practicing mindful observation. It suggests the importance of slowing down in new relationships, allowing time for the initial neurochemical rush to subside before making significant commitments. It encourages listening to the quiet voice of intuition even when the louder voice of infatuation is screaming. The disturbing truth is that the very chemicals that make love feel so exhilarating can also be the architects of our blind spots, leading us to embrace illusions and ignore the warning signs that could protect us from future heartbreak. 7. Attachment styles formed in childhood dictate adult relationships. The blueprint for how we love, how we connect, and how we navigate intimacy in adulthood isn't spontaneously generated in our 20s or 30s. Instead, it is largely etched into our psychological makeup during the earliest years of our lives, forged in the crucible of our primary relationships with caregivers. This is the disturbing and profoundly influential concept of attachment theory, the idea that the patterns of interaction and emotional responsiveness we experience in childhood create deeply ingrained attachment styles that dictate the fundamental nature of our adult romantic relationships, often without our conscious awareness. Developed by psychologists John Bowlby and later expanded by Mary Ainsworth, attachment theory posits that humans have an innate psychobiological system that motivates them to seek proximity to significant others, attachment figures, when distressed. The quality of this attachment in infancy, particularly how consistently and sensitively a caregiver responds to a child's needs, shapes the child's internal working models of self and others. These models are essentially mental templates that guide expectations about relationships, self-worth, and the availability of others. There are broadly 4 primary attachment styles. 1. Secure attachment. This is formed when caregivers are consistently responsive, sensitive, and available. Children with secure attachment learn that they are worthy of love, that their needs will be met, and that others can be trusted. As adults, securely attached individuals tend to have healthy self-esteem, are comfortable with intimacy and independence, can communicate their needs effectively, and navigate conflict constructively. 2. Anxious preoccupied attachment, insecure, anxious, ambivalent. This style often develops when caregivers are inconsistent, sometimes responsive, sometimes intrusive or dismissive. The child learns that they must amplify their distress to get attention, leading to anxiety about abandonment and a constant need for reassurance. In adult relationships, anxious, preoccupied individuals often crave extreme closeness, fear rejection, are prone to jealousy, and can be overly dependent or clinging. They often interpret ambiguous signals negatively and struggle with self-worth, needing constant validation from their partner. 3. Dismissive avoidant attachment, insecure avoidant. This style typically arises when caregivers are consistently unresponsive, rejecting, or uncomfortable with intimacy. The child learns to suppress their emotional needs and become overly self-reliant, believing that others cannot be trusted to meet their needs. As adults, dismissive avoidant individuals tend to value independence above all else, often struggle with emotional intimacy, avoid vulnerability, and can appear emotionally distant or detached. They might dismiss their own emotional needs and those of their partners, often retreating when relationships become too close. 4. Fearful avoidant attachment, disorganized. This is the most complex and often results from inconsistent and frightening caregiving, such as abuse or neglect, where the caregiver is both a source of comfort and a source of fear. The child is caught in an impossible bind, simultaneously wanting closeness and fearing it. In adult relationships, fearful avoidant individuals exhibit a push-pull dynamic. They crave intimacy but are simultaneously terrified of it. They may struggle with trust, have difficulty regulating emotions, and often sabotage relationships as they get too close. The disturbing truth about these attachment styles is their profound and often unconscious influence. We are not simply choosing partners and navigating relationships based on our adult personalities. We are, to a large extent, recreating familiar dynamics established in our formative years. An anxiously attached individual might repeatedly find themselves drawn to avoidant partners, subconsciously reenacting the early experience of chasing inconsistent affection. An avoidant individual might continually seek out partners who are emotionally available, but then push them away when the intimacy becomes too threatening, confirming their belief that closeness leads to pain or suffocation. This means that many of the recurring patterns, conflicts, and dissatisfactions we experience in our romantic lives are not random occurrences, but rather predictable manifestations of these deeply ingrained styles. We might find ourselves perpetually attracted to the wrong type of person, or repeatedly experiencing the same relationship problems precisely because our attachment style is guiding us towards familiar, even if unhealthy territory. Our attachment lens shapes how we perceive our partner's intentions, how we respond to conflict, how we express affection, and how we cope with stress within the relationship. The disturbing aspect is that these patterns are often resistant to change, precisely because they are so deeply embedded and operate largely outside conscious awareness. It takes significant self-reflection, often with therapeutic intervention, to identify one's attachment style, understand its origins, and begin to consciously work towards more secure patterns of relating. Without this awareness, individuals are condemned to repeat their childhood relational scripts, perpetuating cycles of anxiety, avoidance, or emotional chaos in their adult romantic relationships. Furthermore, these attachment styles aren't just about individual behavior. They interact dynamically within a couple. An anxious, preoccupied partner and a dismissive, avoidant partner can create a highly volatile and painful anxious avoidant trap, where the anxious partner chases closeness while the avoidant partner retreats, each inadvertently triggering the other's deepest fears and insecurities. This dynamic, though agonizing, can feel paradoxically familiar and even normal because it echoes early life experiences. Understanding attachment theory is disturbing because it reveals the profound legacy of our childhoods on our adult love lives. It suggests that our capacity for healthy, fulfilling relationships is heavily predisposed by experiences we had before we could even articulate our feelings. However, it also offers a powerful pathway to self-understanding and change. While our attachment styles are formed early, they are not immutable. Through conscious effort, self-awareness, and often the help of therapy, individuals can earn earned security, developing a more secure attachment style and fostering healthier, more fulfilling romantic connections. The initial disturbance gives way to the empowering realization that while our past shapes us, it does not have to define the entirety of our romantic future. 8. Many people fall in love because of loneliness. Loneliness, in its profound and pervasive form, is far more than a fleeting emotion. It is a primal state of distress, a deep-seated ache that signals a fundamental lack of social connection. It can be as debilitating as physical pain, eroding mental well-being, and even impacting physical health. The disturbing psychological truth is that this powerful human experience often serves as an unwitting catalyst for love, driving individuals into relationships not out of a pure, spontaneous attraction to another's essence, but out of a desperate need to fill the void, to alleviate the gnawing emptiness that loneliness creates. In essence, many people fall in love not just with a person, but with the idea of escaping loneliness, making the foundation of such relationships inherently fragile and often fraught with complications. Consider the pervasive nature of loneliness in modern society. Despite being more connected digitally than ever before, genuine, intimate human connection can be elusive. The absence of meaningful relationships, whether familial, platonic, or romantic, leaves a gaping hole in the human experience. When this void persists, the psychological pressure to fill it becomes immense. The brain, wired for connection and belonging, perceives loneliness as a threat, triggering a powerful drive to seek out social interaction. In this state of heightened vulnerability, the prospect of a romantic relationship, with its promise of profound intimacy, shared life, and constant companionship, becomes incredibly alluring. The disturbing aspect is how loneliness can skew our perception and judgment, much like dopamine distorts judgment in early infatuation. When feeling acutely lonely, our standards for a partner can subtly or even dramatically lower. We might become less discerning about compatibility, overlooking fundamental differences in values, life goals, or personality traits that would otherwise be deal breakers. The primary driver becomes the alleviation of loneliness rather than the pursuit of a genuinely compatible and healthy partnership. Any individual who offers attention, affection, and the promise of companionship can suddenly appear far more attractive and suitable than they might otherwise. This doesn't mean that people consciously choose partners they don't truly love. Rather, loneliness creates a psychological environment where the feelings of love can blossom prematurely or be misattributed. The intense relief that comes from no longer being alone can be mistaken for the deep, genuine affection of true love. The comfort of having someone to share life with, the validation of being desired, the simple presence of another person. These vital needs, when met after a period of profound loneliness, can feel overwhelmingly powerful, leading to an intense emotional attachment that is deeply intertwined with the escape from isolation. Furthermore, loneliness can make individuals more susceptible to manipulation or to settling for less than they deserve. A person who is desperate for connection might tolerate unhealthy behaviors, accept an unequal dynamic, or ignore their own needs, simply because the alternative, returning to the solitude, feels unbearable. The fear of being alone again can be a powerful inhibitor, keeping individuals tethered to relationships that are ultimately unfulfilling or even detrimental, all in the service of avoiding the perceived agony of loneliness. The consequences of falling in love primarily out of loneliness can be profound for both individuals involved. For the person driven by loneliness, the relationship might provide temporary relief, but it often fails to address the underlying issues that contributed to their loneliness in the first place. The relationship becomes a crutch, and if it falters, the return to solitude can be even more devastating, as it confirms their deepest fears. They might also find themselves constantly seeking validation and reassurance from their partner, placing an undue burden on the relationship to fulfill all their emotional needs, which no single person can realistically do. For the partner, being loved primarily as an antidote to loneliness can be an isolating experience. They might sense that the affection is more about filling a void than about genuine appreciation for who they are. This can lead to feelings of being used, resentment, and a lack of true reciprocity in the emotional exchange. The relationship, built on a foundation of need rather than mutual desire and compatibility, can struggle to evolve into a truly intimate and resilient partnership. This disturbing fact also highlights the importance of cultivating self-sufficiency and addressing loneliness from within. True love, while offering companionship, should ideally enhance an already whole individual, not a fragmented one. When loneliness is the primary driver, the relationship often becomes a compensation mechanism rather than a genuine connection between two independent beings. Ultimately, the phenomenon of falling in love due to loneliness serves as a poignant reminder of our innate human need for connection and the lengths to which our psychological systems will go to satisfy that need. It reveals the complex and sometimes murky motivations behind our most profound emotional experiences. While companionship is a beautiful aspect of love, when the escape from solitude becomes the overriding motivation, the love itself can become a fragile construct built on a foundation of desperate need rather than authentic desire, leaving both individuals vulnerable to deeper forms of emotional pain when the initial illusion inevitably fades. 9. Humans bond faster during emotional vulnerability, even if it's unhealthy. There's a widely held belief that vulnerability is a cornerstone of genuine intimacy, a necessary ingredient for deep connection. And in many healthy contexts, this is true. Sharing our authentic selves, our fears, hopes, and insecurities can indeed foster profound bonds. However, there's a disturbing psychological twist to this truth. Humans possess an innate, almost primal tendency to bond faster and more intensely during moments of shared emotional vulnerability, distress, or trauma, even when the circumstances are inherently unhealthy or the connection formed is ultimately detrimental. This phenomenon, often observed in high-stress situations, crisis, or environments of shared hardship, reveals a darker side of our drive for connection, where the intensity of shared pain can be mistaken for the depth of true love or compatibility. This accelerated bonding during vulnerability is rooted in our evolutionary history. When faced with threat or distress, humans are wired to seek safety and connection with others. A shared experience of fear, anxiety, or profound sadness can rapidly break down social barriers, creating an immediate sense of solidarity and mutual reliance. The brain, under stress, releases neurochemicals like oxytocin and vasopressin, which are crucial for social bonding and trust. When two individuals experience intense emotional vulnerability together, these chemicals can create a powerful, almost instantaneous feeling of closeness and interdependence. Consider scenarios like natural disasters, wartime, or even intense, emotionally charged competitive environments. Individuals who go through these experiences together often form incredibly strong, often lifelong bonds. They've seen each other at their most vulnerable, witnessed raw emotions, and relied on each other for support. This shared crucible forges a connection that feels exceptionally deep and meaningful. In a romantic context, this can manifest in various ways. Perhaps a couple meets during a period of personal crisis, such as a major illness, a family tragedy, or a significant career setback. The intense emotional support, the shared tears, the feeling of us against the world can create an immediate and powerful sense of intimacy. The disturbing aspect arises when this accelerated bonding, born out of shared vulnerability or distress, is misattributed as a sign of profound romantic compatibility or genuine healthy love. The intensity of the emotional experience can be so overwhelming that it overshadows other crucial aspects of a relationship, such as shared values, long-term compatibility, healthy communication patterns, or individual autonomy. The bond feels incredibly strong, not necessarily because the two individuals are a perfect match, but because their nervous systems are deeply intertwined by a shared state of heightened emotion and mutual dependence. This phenomenon is particularly insidious in the context of trauma bonding, which we'll discuss in more detail later. In abusive relationships, cycles of abuse, followed by periods of intense remorse and affection from the abuser, can create a powerful, unhealthy bond. The victim's vulnerability during the abuse, combined with the abuser's subsequent love bombing and promises of change, can trigger intense feelings of attachment and loyalty. The shared emotional roller coaster, however destructive, can be misinterpreted as passion or a profound, unique connection. The victim feels an intense emotional dependence on the abuser, believing only they truly understand their pain, even as they are the source of it. Furthermore, this rapid bonding can sometimes bypass the necessary stages of getting to know someone in a healthy, gradual way. In a normal relationship progression, trust and intimacy are built over time through shared experiences, consistent behavior, and open communication. When emotional vulnerability is the primary catalyst for bonding, these foundational elements might be underdeveloped. The relationship can feel very deep very quickly, creating an illusion of intimacy that lacks a solid, stable base. Partners might feel intensely connected on an emotional level, but discover later that they have very little in common or that their individual identities have become dangerously enmeshed. The intensity of feeling generated during these vulnerable bonding moments can also make it incredibly difficult to later disengage from the relationship, even if it proves to be unhealthy. The perceived depth of the connection, forged in moments of profound emotional exposure, creates a powerful sense of loyalty and obligation. To leave such a relationship can feel like betraying a sacred bond, even if staying means continued suffering. Understanding this disturbing psychological fact is crucial for discerning the true nature of our relationships. It encourages us to differentiate between the intense emotional rush of shared vulnerability and the more stable and enduring qualities of healthy, mature love. While moments of vulnerability are indeed important, they should ideally occur within a framework of already established trust, respect, and compatibility, rather than serving as the sole or primary foundation for a relationship. The disturbing truth is that our innate drive for connection can sometimes lead us to cling to bonds formed in the crucible of pain, mistaking survival for love, and trapping us in connections that are powerful, yes, but ultimately detrimental to our well-being. Dis 9. Love can make people justify abusive behavior. Perhaps one of the most agonizing and disturbing aspects of love is its capacity to cloud judgment to such an extent that individuals find themselves not only tolerating but actively justifying abusive behavior from a partner. This isn't a sign of weakness or a lack of intelligence. It's a complex psychological phenomenon rooted in a cognitive biases, emotional dependency, and societal conditioning, all of which can be amplified by the powerful, often irrational forces of love. The tragic truth is that love, intended to be a source of solace and joy, can become the very mechanism through which harm is normalized and endured. The justification of abuse is rarely a conscious, straightforward decision. Instead, it's an insidious, gradual process that chips away at an individual's self-worth and perception of reality. At the heart of this process lies cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort experienced by a person who holds two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values, or who performs an action that is contradictory to one or more of their beliefs. When someone loves a partner who is abusive, they hold two conflicting truths. I love this person, and this person is hurting me. To resolve this painful dissonance, the brain often resorts to rationalization, altering one's perception of the abusive behavior to align with the enduring feeling of love. This rationalization can take many forms. Victims might minimize the abuse. It wasn't that bad. They didn't mean it. Blame themselves. If only I hadn't said that. I provoked them. Or attribute the abuse to external factors. They're under a lot of stress. They had a difficult childhood. They might focus intensely on the good moments, the periods of remorse and affection that often follow an abusive incident, using these as evidence that their partner truly loves them and that the abuse is merely an anomaly. This cycle of abuse and affection, often referred to as the honeymoon phase in the cycle of violence, is incredibly powerful in reinforcing the victim's hope for change and their justification of the preceding harm. The role of emotional dependency, often intertwined with attachment styles, as previously discussed, also plays a significant part. If an individual has an anxious, preoccupied attachment style, they might cling desperately to the relationship, fearing abandonment more than the abuse itself. The abuser, often skilled at manipulation, can exploit this fear, making the victim believe they are responsible for the abuser's happiness or that they wouldn't survive without the relationship. This creates a powerful trap where the perceived love, however distorted, becomes synonymous with security, and leaving feels like an unimaginable threat. Moreover, love can induce a profound sense of loyalty and commitment, particularly in long-term relationships, where shared history, children, or financial ties are involved. The idea of abandoning a partner, even an abusive one, can feel like a deep betrayal of the love and vows exchanged. This loyalty can be weaponized by abusers, who often isolate their victims from friends and family, further eroding their support system and making them more reliant on the abuser's narrative. Societal conditioning also plays a disturbing role. Romantic narratives often emphasize enduring hardship for love, fixing a troubled partner, or seeing the good in everyone. These cultural messages, while well-intentioned in healthy contexts, can inadvertently encourage victims of abuse to stay and justify, believing that their love can somehow transform their abuser or that they are morally obligated to remain. The shame and stigma associated with being in an abusive relationship can also prevent victims from seeking help or even acknowledging the abuse to themselves, reinforcing the cycle of justification. The disturbing implication is that the very depth of one's love, the strength of one's commitment, and the desire to see the best in another can be tragically twisted into the chains that bind an individual to suffering. Love, in these contexts, becomes a form of psychological blindness, where the desire for connection and the fear of loss override the instinct for self-preservation and the recognition of fundamental harm. Breaking free from this cycle of justification requires immense strength, often facilitated by external support and professional intervention. It involves dismantling deeply ingrained cognitive biases, challenging emotional dependencies, and rediscovering a sense of self-worth independent of the abusive relationship. The disturbing truth that love can make people justify abusive behavior is a stark reminder of the complex and often dangerous interplay between our emotions, our psychology, and the profound impact of our relationships, urging us to remain vigilant against the subtle erosions of self that can occur when love becomes a justification for harm rather than a source of genuine well-being. 11. People confuse trauma bonding with genuine affection. Trauma bonding is one of the most insidious and disturbing psychological phenomena that can occur in relationships, particularly those characterized by cycles of abuse, devaluation, and positive reinforcement. It's a powerful, often perplexing attachment that develops between an abuser and their victim, where the victim confuses intense emotional highs and lows, intermittent positive reinforcement, and a shared experience of crisis or pain with genuine affection, love, or even a unique, profound connection. This disturbing confusion traps individuals in deeply damaging relationships, making escape extraordinarily difficult, precisely because the bond feels so real and so intense. The concept of trauma bonding was initially identified in studies of hostage situations, like the Stockholm Syndrome, and later applied to domestic abuse, cults, and other manipulative dynamics. It's characterized by an emotional attachment that forms in the presence of a repetitive cycle of abuse, devaluation, and positive reinforcement. This cycle typically involves love bombing or idealization. The abuser initially showers the victim with intense affection, attention, and flattery, creating a powerful sense of being special and deeply loved. Abuse or devaluation. This is followed by periods of emotional, verbal, psychological, or physical abuse, which leaves the victim feeling confused, hurt, and devalued. Remorse, apology, false hope. After the abuse, the abuser expresses deep remorse, promises to change, and returns to love bombing, often making the victim feel indispensable and responsible for the abuser's good side. This intermittent reinforcement is incredibly potent in cementing the trauma bond. The brain, constantly oscillating between fear and relief, pain and pleasure, becomes highly sensitized to the abuser's sporadic kindness. The moments of positive attention, however fleeting, become intensely rewarding, creating a powerful craving for them. This creates a situation akin to addiction, where the victim becomes dependent on the abuser for the fix of affection that temporarily alleviates the pain and anxiety caused by the abuse itself. The disturbing confusion with genuine affection arises because the emotional intensity of a trauma bond can be overwhelming. The extreme highs and lows, the feeling of navigating a crisis together, the profound sense of needing and being needed, all these can be misinterpreted as signs of a passionate, deep, and unique love. The victim might believe that no one else could possibly understand the complexities of their relationship, or that their bond with the abuser is so powerful that it transcends normal relationship dynamics. They often feel a profound sense of loyalty and protectiveness toward the abuser, believing they are the only one who can save them or bring out their good side. Furthermore, the shared experience of crisis or the constant state of emotional upheaval within an abusive relationship can trigger the same accelerated bonding mechanisms we discussed earlier, topic 9. The victim's heightened vulnerability and distress, combined with the abuser's intermittent kindness, can flood the brain with bonding hormones like oxytocin, creating an artificial sense of deep connection and trust. This chemical response reinforces the belief that the bond is authentic and profound, making it incredibly difficult to see the underlying pathology. Another element contributing to this confusion is the abuser's masterful manipulation. Abusers often isolate their victims, erode their self-esteem, and gaslight them into doubting their own perceptions. This creates a reality where the abuser's narrative becomes the dominant one, and the victim's sense of self is so diminished that they believe they are worthless without the abuser. In this distorted reality, the abuser's intermittent affection, however meager, feels like a lifeline, a confirmation of their worth, further solidifying the trauma bond and confusing it with genuine love. The consequences of confusing trauma bonding with genuine affection are devastating. Victims remain trapped in destructive cycles, enduring repeated abuse, suffering severe psychological damage, and often losing their sense of identity and autonomy. They may continually hope for the abuser to change, clinging to the idealized version of the partner presented during the love-bombing phases, rather than confronting the reality of the abuse. This confusion makes it incredibly difficult to leave the relationship, as the bond feels as strong, if not stronger, than healthy love, and the thought of breaking it evokes intense emotional pain and fear of abandonment. Recognizing trauma bonding requires an external perspective, often from therapists, friends, or family, who can help the victim see the reality of their situation. It involves understanding that intense emotional experiences, particularly those involving cycles of pain and relief, are not synonymous with healthy intimacy. The disturbing truth of trauma bonding is its capacity to hijack our deepest human needs for connection and belonging, twisting them into a powerful, self-destructive attachment that masquerades as love, trapping individuals in a web of pain under the guise of profound affection. 12. The fear of being alone keeps many in toxic relationships. The human aversion to solitude is a powerful, deeply ingrained psychological force, often underestimated in its capacity to shape our life choices, particularly in matters of the heart. While the desire for companionship is natural and healthy, for many, the fear of being alone transcends a simple preference and morphs into a paralyzing dread. This disturbing psychological truth reveals itself most tragically in the context of toxic relationships, where individuals, despite enduring emotional pain, manipulation, or even abuse, remain tethered to their partners not out of love, but out of an overwhelming, existential terror of confronting solitude. This fear of being alone, also known as monophobia or autophobia, is distinct from simply enjoying company. It's an intense anxiety or panic that arises at the prospect of being by oneself, whether physically or emotionally. It can stem from various sources: unresolved childhood attachment issues, low self-esteem that equates being alone with being unlovable, societal pressures to be in a relationship, or past experiences of abandonment. Whatever its origin, this fear creates a profound vulnerability that toxic partners are often adept at exploiting, or that individuals themselves inadvertently use as a rationale for enduring harm. Consider the psychological landscape of someone gripped by the fear of being alone. The thought of ending a relationship, even one that is clearly detrimental, can trigger intense anxiety, panic attacks, or a profound sense of impending doom. The perceived void left by a partner, however flawed, feels infinitely more terrifying than the known discomfort of the toxic dynamic. For such individuals, the presence of any partner, even one who causes pain, is preferable to the perceived emptiness of solitude. This preference is not rational. It's an emotional imperative driven by a primal need for connection and a desperate avoidance of perceived abandonment. This fear can manifest in various ways that perpetuate toxic relationships. Individuals might rationalize abuse. As discussed earlier, they might minimize harmful behaviors, blame themselves, or focus on fleeting moments of kindness to justify staying, all to avoid the terrifying prospect of singlehood. Lower their standards. They might accept substandard treatment, compromise their values, or tolerate disrespect because they believe this relationship, however flawed, is their only chance at not being alone. Become overly dependent. They might lose their sense of self, their hobbies, and their friendships, becoming entirely reliant on their partner for validation and companionship, making the thought of leaving even more daunting. Avoid conflict. They might suppress their own needs and feelings to maintain peace, fearing that any disagreement could lead to the relationship's demise and a return to loneliness. Ignore external advice. Friends and family might see the toxicity clearly and advise leaving, but the fear of being alone can make the individual resistant to all external intervention, perceiving it as a threat to their perceived security. The disturbing aspect of this dynamic is that the very act of staying in a toxic relationship to avoid loneliness often exacerbates the underlying problem. The constant devaluation, manipulation, or emotional neglect within such relationships further erodes self-esteem, making the individual even more dependent and more fearful of being alone. They become trapped in a self-perpetuating cycle. Low self-worth fuels the fear of loneliness, which makes them cling to a toxic relationship, which in turn further diminishes their self-worth. Moreover, the fear of being alone can blind individuals to the possibility of healthier relationships or to the profound personal growth that can occur during periods of solitude. They may believe that their current toxic partner is the best they can do, or that no one else would ever want them. This distorted perception prevents them from recognizing their own worth and from seeking out partnerships that genuinely foster their well-being. Breaking free from a relationship dictated by the fear of being alone requires immense courage and often professional support. It involves confronting the root causes of the fear, rebuilding self-esteem, and learning to cultivate a healthy relationship with oneself. It means understanding that true companionship should enhance one's life, not merely serve as a shield against a perceived void. The disturbing truth that the fear of being alone keeps many in toxic relationships is a poignant reminder of the profound impact of our deepest insecurities on our romantic lives, highlighting how the absence of self-love can tragically bind us to sources of suffering in a desperate attempt to avoid the perceived emptiness of solitude. 13. Rejection increases romantic attraction due to scarcity bias. It's a perplexing and often infuriating paradox of human psychology. The harder someone is to get, the more we seem to want them. The sting of rejection, rather than extinguishing the flame of attraction, can sometimes fan it into an even more intense blaze. This disturbing psychological phenomenon is largely explained by the scarcity bias, a cognitive shortcut that leads us to value things more highly when they are perceived as rare, exclusive, or difficult to obtain. In the realm of romantic love, rejection can inadvertently signal scarcity, making the rejecting individual appear more desirable, more valuable, and therefore more intensely pursued. The scarcity bias is a fundamental principle in economics and marketing. Limited edition products, exclusive memberships, or items in short supply are often perceived as having greater value and desirability. Our brains are wired to prioritize resources that are scarce, as they historically represented greater survival advantage. This ancient wiring extends disturbingly into our romantic pursuits. When someone rejects us, especially if they are otherwise desirable, their unavailability immediately signals a form of scarcity. They are not readily available. They are a challenge, a prize that is not easily won. Consider a scenario. You are casually interested in someone, but when they express disinterest or explicitly reject your advances, your attraction suddenly skyrockets. The person who was merely nice or attractive now becomes an enigma, a challenge, and an object of intense desire. The rejection, rather than diminishing their appeal, elevates it. Your brain interprets their unavailability as a sign of high value. If they are so selective, they must be truly exceptional, and therefore I must want them even more. This cognitive leap can be almost instantaneous and entirely unconscious. This effect is amplified by several other psychological factors. The forbidden fruit effect. What is denied or difficult to obtain often becomes more appealing. Ego threat. Rejection can wound our ego, creating a powerful motivation to win the person over, to restore our self-esteem. The pursuit becomes less about genuine connection and more about proving our worth. Intermittent reinforcement. If the rejecting individual occasionally offers a glimmer of hope, a friendly smile, a brief moment of engagement, it can create a powerful addictive cycle. The uncertainty and the intermittent positive reinforcement amplify the desire, much like the dynamic seen in gambling. Loss aversion. We tend to feel the pain of loss more acutely than the pleasure of gain. The potential loss of a romantic opportunity, especially one that has become scarce, can trigger a powerful drive to prevent that loss. The disturbing implication of scarcity bias in romantic rejection is that it can lead individuals to pursue partners who are fundamentally incompatible, emotionally unavailable, or even harmful, simply because their unavailability makes them seem more valuable. This isn't about healthy challenge or genuine pursuit, it's about a distorted perception of worth driven by a cognitive bias. The individual might become intensely focused on winning the rejecting person, pouring immense emotional energy into a pursuit that is unlikely to lead to a fulfilling relationship, precisely because the initial rejection created an artificial inflation of desirability. This phenomenon is particularly prevalent in situations where one person is already emotionally avoidant. Their natural tendency to create distance and appear aloof can inadvertently trigger the scarcity bias in a potential partner, making them seem more desirable, and leading to a persistent, often painful, chase. The avoidant person's withdrawal creates the scarcity, which then fuels the anxious person's pursuit, creating a frustrating and often unresolvable dynamic. Understanding that rejection can increase attraction due to scarcity bias is crucial for self-awareness in dating and relationships. It encourages us to pause and question the intensity of our feelings when faced with disinterest. Is this genuine attraction, or is an ego response to perceived scarcity? Is this person truly a good match for me, or have they simply become more appealing because they are not readily available? The disturbing truth is that our brains, in their attempt to assign value, can sometimes lead us down paths of intense yet ultimately unfulfilling romantic pursuits, making us crave what we cannot have simply because it is denied. 14. People often fall harder for those who give mixed signals. Few romantic experiences are as emotionally turbulent and psychologically perplexing as being involved with someone who consistently sends mixed signals. One moment they are warm, engaged, and affectionate, hinting at a deep connection. The next, they are distant, aloof, or ambiguous, leaving you confused and anxious. This infuriating inconsistency, far from deterring interest, often has the disturbing effect of making people fall harder and become more intensely preoccupied with the individual. This phenomenon is a potent psychological trap, leveraging uncertainty, intermittent reinforcement, and the brain's insatiable need for closure to create a powerful, almost addictive emotional dependency. The core of this dynamic lies in the principles of intermittent reinforcement, a concept borrowed from behavioral psychology. In constant reinforcement, a behavior is rewarded every time it occurs. In intermittent reinforcement, the reward is delivered unpredictably. This creates a much stronger, more persistent, and more resistant to extinction behavior. Think of a slot machine. It doesn't pay out every time, but the unpredictable nature of the reward keeps people pulling the lever. In a relationship with mixed signals, the reward is the partner's attention, affection, or clear communication. When these are given inconsistently, they become highly potent. When a partner gives mixed signals, they create a state of profound uncertainty. One moment you're soaring on the high of their affection, believing the relationship is progressing. The next, you're plunged into doubt, wondering where you stand. This emotional roller coaster is deeply unsettling, and the brain, which abhors uncertainty, becomes intensely focused on trying to resolve the ambiguity. It starts to obsessively analyze every word, every gesture, every nuance, searching for patterns, clues, or definitive answers. This obsessive rumination, fueled by anxiety, makes the person giving mixed signals the central focus of your thoughts and emotions. The disturbing aspect is that the highs in this cycle become incredibly powerful. After a period of doubt and anxiety, even a small gesture of warmth or clarity from the mixed signal giver feels like an immense relief and a profound reward. This intense relief, often accompanied with a dopamine surge, reinforces the belief that the person is worth pursuing, that the connection is real, and that the good moments are the true indication of their feelings. The brain learns that persistence, despite the pain, eventually leads to a reward, thus strengthening the attachment and the desire to win their consistent affection. Furthermore, mixed signals often trigger a person's underlying attachment insecurities. For individuals with an anxious, preoccupied attachment style, mixed signals are particularly devastating yet powerfully attractive. They confirm their deepest fears of abandonment and unworthiness, yet simultaneously offer the tantalizing possibility of finally earning consistent love and validation. The pursuit of the mixed signal giver becomes a subconscious attempt to heal old wounds and prove their lovability. The more the partner pulls away, the more intensely the anxiously attached individual pursues, creating a painful, anxious, avoidant trap where both partners inadvertently reinforce each other's unhealthy patterns. The individual receiving mixed signals often attributes the inconsistency to external factors or to their own shortcomings. Maybe I'm not good enough, they're just busy, rather than to the partner's deliberate or unconscious manipulation. This self-blame further entrenches them in the dynamic, as they believe that if they just try harder, are more patient, or change something about themselves, they can unlock the consistent affection they crave. The consequences are profound: a constant state of anxiety, emotional exhaustion, diminished self-esteem, and an inability to move forward or backward in the relationship. The person becomes emotionally tethered to an unpredictable source of validation, their emotional well-being dictated by the whims of another. The relationship, rather than being a source of security and joy, becomes a perpetual puzzle, a source of constant yearning and unresolved tension. Understanding that people often fall harder for those who give mixed signals is disturbing because it reveals how our psychological vulnerabilities can be exploited, even unintentionally, by inconsistent behavior. It highlights how the brain's craving for certainty and reward can lead us into patterns of intense yet ultimately unfulfilling emotional entanglement. It serves as a crucial warning to recognize these patterns and prioritize clarity, consistency, and respect in our relationships, rather than chasing the elusive and often damaging highs offered by those who refuse to show their hand. The disturbing truth is that the most confusing connections can often be the most captivating, precisely because they keep us perpetually on edge, desperately hoping for a consistent love that may never truly materialize. 15. Partners tend to idealize each other early on and then feel betrayed later. The intoxicating dawn of a new relationship is often bathed in a golden glow, a period where every aspect of a partner seems perfect, their flaws either invisible or charmingly unique. This phenomenon, known as idealization, is a powerful and almost universal aspect of early romantic love. It's a psychological mechanism that allows us to construct an idealized image of our beloved, imbuing them with qualities that may not fully align with reality. The disturbing psychological truth, however, is that this very act of idealization sets the stage for a profound sense of betrayal later on, as the inevitable reality of human imperfection clashes violently with the carefully constructed fantasy. Idealization is driven by a combination of factors: In the initial phases of love, dopamine floods the brain, creating a euphoric state that biases our perception towards the positive. We are actively seeking to confirm our initial attraction and the belief that this person is the one. This leads to a cognitive bias where we selectively focus on our partner's strengths, positive attributes, and shared interests, while consciously or unconsciously downplaying, ignoring, or reinterpreting their less desirable traits. We project our own desires and needs onto them, seeing them as the embodiment of everything we've ever wanted in a partner. They become a mirror reflecting our highest hopes and dreams. This idealization is often mutual. Both partners, eager to impress and to be loved, present their best selves, highlighting their virtues and minimizing their vices. They are, in essence, performing for each other, creating an almost perfect facade that reinforces the other's idealized vision. This reciprocal process deepens the illusion, making the idealized image feel incredibly real and solid. The disturbing aspect begins when the honeymoon phase inevitably wanes. As the initial neurochemical rush subsides and the relationship matures, the intense focus on perfection naturally begins to soften. The partners start to spend more time together, encounter more diverse situations, and drop their guarded behaviors. It is during this period that the true, multifaceted, and imperfect human being behind the idealized image begins to emerge. Their quirks, once charming, might become annoying habits. Their strengths, once seen as superhuman, now appear to have corresponding weaknesses. Their differences in opinion, once easily overlooked, now become sources of conflict. This collision between the idealized fantasy and the gritty reality can be profoundly unsettling. The individual who once seemed flawless now reveals their flaws, their insecurities, their less appealing habits, their fundamental differences. And this revelation, disturbingly, is often experienced not just as disappointment, but a deep sense of betrayal. The feeling is not "they have changed," but rather, "they are not who I thought they were." The betrayal is not necessarily an act of deceit on the partner's part, but rather the shattering of the illusion that the idealizing individual themselves constructed. The intensity of this feeling of betrayal is directly proportional to the degree of initial idealization. The higher the pedestal a partner was placed on, the further they have to fall, and the more painful the crash. This can lead to resentment, disillusionment, and a questioning of the entire relationship. The individual might feel cheated, believing their partner deliberately misled them, when in reality they were largely projecting their own desires onto an imperfect human being. This phenomenon is particularly damaging because it can undermine the very foundation of a relationship. Instead of embracing the complexity and imperfection of a real human being, the betrayed individual might cling to the memory of the idealized version, constantly comparing their partner to a phantom. This can lead to chronic dissatisfaction, a perpetual feeling that something is missing, and an inability to fully appreciate the genuine, albeit imperfect, love that is present. It can also lead to a cycle of seeking new partners, only to repeat the idealization-disillusionment cycle, perpetually chasing an unattainable fantasy. Understanding that partners tend to idealize each other early on and then feel betrayed later is crucial for navigating the complexities of long-term love. It requires cultivating self-awareness, recognizing our own tendencies to project, and consciously choosing to love the real, imperfect person rather than clinging to a flawless fantasy. The disturbing truth is that our initial romantic bliss can be built on a foundation of self-deception, and the journey to genuine enduring love often involves a painful reckoning with reality, where the cherished illusion must be shattered before true acceptance can begin. 16. People lie more to partners than to strangers to avoid conflict. It seems counterintuitive, even disturbing, to suggest that we are more dishonest with those we purportedly love and trust the most than with casual acquaintances or strangers. Yet psychological research and anecdotal evidence strongly indicate this is often the case. The disturbing truth is that people frequently lie more to their romantic partners, not out of malice or a desire to deceive, but primarily out of a deep-seated fear of conflict. a misguided attempt to maintain harmony, or an effort to manage their partner's emotional reactions. This pervasive pattern of pro-social lying, or white lies, reveals a profound vulnerability in intimate relationships, where the desire for peace can inadvertently erode the very foundation of trust. The primary driver behind lying to partners to avoid conflict is the strong human aversion to confrontation and the deeply ingrained desire to maintain positive social bonds. In intimate relationships, where emotional stakes are incredibly high, the prospect of an argument, disagreement, or causing distress to a loved one can be profoundly unsettling. The fear of their anger, disappointment, or withdrawal can be a powerful motivator to obscure the truth, even if it's a minor one. Consider common scenarios. The little white lie about preferences. "Yes, honey, I love your mother's cooking," when in reality you find it barely edible. The lie is told to avoid hurting feelings or sparking a defensive reaction, even if it means enduring an unpleasant meal. Concealing minor transgressions. "No, I didn't spend that much on the new gadget," to avoid an argument about finances or perceived irresponsibility. Hiding personal opinions or feelings. "I'm fine, really," when you're actually upset, to avoid a difficult conversation or to prevent your partner from feeling burdened. Exaggerating positive traits or downplaying negative ones. "Of course, you're the best at X," to boost a partner's ego and avoid potential insecurity or conflict. These lies, while often perceived as harmless or even well-intentioned, accrue over time. Each small untruth creates a subtle fissure in the bedrock of trust. While a stranger's opinion might not matter much, a partner's potential disapproval or negative reaction carries significant weight. We invest so much emotional capital in our romantic relationships that the perceived threat of conflict or rejection feels far more acute than it would with someone less significant. The disturbing aspect is that while these lies are intended to protect the relationship or the partner's feelings, they ultimately do the opposite. Trust is built on honesty and transparency, even when the truth is uncomfortable. When a partner discovers they have been lied to, even about something seemingly trivial, it can trigger a profound sense of betrayal, questioning not just the specific lie, but the entire foundation of honesty in the relationship. The thought arises, if they lied about this small thing, what else have they lied about? This erosion of trust can be incredibly difficult to repair and can lead to a pervasive sense of insecurity and suspicion. Moreover, a pattern of lying to avoid conflict can prevent genuine intimacy and problem-solving. If partners are constantly shielding each other from uncomfortable truths, they never truly learn to navigate disagreements, to express their authentic selves, or to build resilience in the face of challenges. The relationship remains superficial in certain aspects, built on a fragile peace rather than robust honesty. It prevents both individuals from fully understanding each other's true feelings, needs, and boundaries. This phenomenon also speaks to a deeper fear of vulnerability and a lack of secure communication skills within the relationship. If one or both partners believe that honesty will inevitably lead to destructive conflict, it suggests an underlying issue in how disagreements are handled. A healthy relationship allows for the expression of differing opinions and uncomfortable truths, with the expectation that challenges can be worked through constructively. When lying becomes the default, it signals a breakdown in this fundamental relational capacity. This disturbing truth that people lie more to partners than to strangers to avoid conflict is a stark reminder of the complex interplay between our desire for harmony, our fear of confrontation, and the essential role of honesty in intimate connections. It challenges the romantic notion that love inherently fosters absolute truthfulness, revealing instead how our insecurities and our aversion to discomfort can lead us to compromise the very trust we cherish most. Ultimately, it underscores the critical importance of cultivating open, honest communication, even when it's difficult, as the true strength of a relationship lies not in the absence of conflict, but in the ability to navigate it with integrity and transparency. 17. Love reduces critical thinking about the partner's flaws. The initial stages of love are often described as a form of temporary insanity, a state where the beloved appears flawless, their every action imbued with charm, and their imperfections either invisible or endearing. This isn't merely a poetic exaggeration, it's a disturbing psychological reality. Love, particularly in its intense early phases, significantly reduces our capacity for critical thinking when it comes to evaluating our partner's flaws. The brain actively suppresses the neural circuits involved in negative judgment and social criticism, effectively creating a halo effect that blinds us to potential red flags and biases our perception overwhelmingly towards the positive. This phenomenon is deeply rooted in neurobiology. When we are deeply in love, our brains are flooded with neurochemicals like dopamine, oxytocin, and vasopressin, which promote bonding, pleasure, and attachment. Simultaneously, activity in brain regions associated with negative emotions, social judgment, and critical assessment, such as parts of the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, tends to decrease. The amygdala, for instance, is crucial for detecting threats and processing fear. Its reduced activity in the presence of a loved one means that our brain is less likely to register their negative traits or behaviors as threatening or problematic. This neurological shift creates a powerful cognitive bias known as the rose-tinted glasses effect. We become remarkably adept at rationalizing away a partner's shortcomings, finding excuses for their questionable behavior, or simply failing to notice them at all. A partner's chronic lateness might be reinterpreted as charming spontaneity. Their occasional temper flare-ups might be seen as passionate intensity. Their inability to commit might be framed as a need for freedom that you, as their loving partner, must understand. The brain, eager to maintain the positive illusion and the pleasurable neurochemical state, actively works to filter out or reinterpret any information that contradicts the idealized image. This reduction in critical thinking is further amplified by our innate desire for connection and the vulnerability inherent in early love. We want to believe our partner is wonderful because their wonderfulness validates our choice, justifies our emotional investment, and fulfills our hopes for a perfect relationship. To acknowledge significant flaws would be to introduce cognitive dissonance and threaten the very foundation of our burgeoning affection. Therefore, the brain engages in a form of self-protection, suppressing critical analysis to preserve the emotional comfort and excitement of new love. The disturbing implication is that this reduction in critical thinking leaves individuals highly vulnerable. They might enter into relationships with partners who are genuinely incompatible, emotionally unhealthy, or even manipulative, simply because their love-addled brain is unable to accurately assess the risks. Red flags that would be glaringly obvious to an objective observer are completely missed or dismissed as trivial. This can lead to significant pain and disillusionment later on, when the initial neurochemical haze dissipates and the unvarnished reality of the partner's flaws becomes undeniable. Moreover, this phenomenon can prevent individuals from setting healthy boundaries or addressing problematic behaviors early in a relationship. If a partner's flaws are consistently overlooked or excused, there is no impetus for them to change, and the problematic patterns can become entrenched. The loving partner, blinded by their affection, might inadvertently enable behaviors that are ultimately detrimental to their own well-being and the long-term health of the relationship. While a degree of positive regard and acceptance of flaws is essential for any enduring relationship, the initial extreme suppression of critical thinking is not sustainable or healthy. Mature love involves seeing a partner clearly, flaws and all, and choosing to love them anyway. It's about acknowledging imperfections without idealizing them away. The disturbing truth that love reduces critical thinking about a partner's flaws highlights our susceptibility to emotional biases, reminding us that even in our most profound connections, a healthy dose of self-awareness and objective assessment is crucial to build a relationship on a foundation of reality rather than a fragile, dopamine-fueled illusion. 18. Emotional manipulation in relationships often goes unnoticed. Emotional manipulation is a pervasive, insidious force in many relationships, yet its disturbing efficacy lies precisely in its often unnoticed nature. Unlike overt physical abuse, emotional manipulation operates in the shadows, subtly eroding a person's self-esteem, sense of reality, and autonomy, often leaving the victim confused, self-doubting, and trapped without ever fully realizing the extent of the control being exerted. The disturbing truth is that the very intimacy and trust in romantic relationships provide fertile ground for manipulators to operate, making their tactics particularly difficult to detect, especially when masked by displays of love or concern. Emotional manipulation encompasses a range of tactics designed to control another person's emotions, perceptions, or behavior. These can include gaslighting, making someone doubt their own sanity or perception of reality, guilt-tripping, playing the victim, passive aggression, projection, stonewalling, isolation, and intermittent reinforcement. The key characteristic is that these behaviors are not about honest communication or mutual respect. They are about gaining power and control. Several factors contribute to why emotional manipulation so often goes unnoticed in relationships. Gradual escalation. Manipulation rarely begins with extreme tactics. It often starts subtly, a minor guilt trip, a slight reinterpretation of events, a subtle dig, and gradually escalates over time. The victim adapts to each small step, making it harder to recognize the full extent of the abuse. Masked by love. Manipulators often intersperse their controlling behaviors with declarations of love, acts of kindness, or expressions of concern. This intermittent reinforcement, as discussed in topic 14, creates confusion and keeps the victim hoping for the good partner to return, making them rationalize the manipulative behavior as a temporary lapse or a sign of intense, albeit misguided, affection. Erosion of self-esteem. Manipulators systematically chip away at their victims' self-worth, making them doubt their judgment, intelligence, and attractiveness. A person with low self-esteem is less likely to trust their own instincts about being manipulated, and more likely to believe the manipulator's narrative. Gaslighting. This is perhaps the most insidious manipulative tactic. By consistently denying events, distorting facts, or questioning the victim's memory, the manipulator makes the victim doubt their own sanity. That never happened. You're too sensitive. You're imagining things. This undermines the victim's ability to trust their own perceptions, making it nearly impossible to identify the manipulation. Isolation. Manipulators often subtly or overtly isolate their victims from friends and family, cutting off external sources of validation and perspective. Without a support system, the victim becomes more reliant on the manipulator's version of reality. Emotional dependence. As discussed in previous points, individuals can become emotionally dependent on a partner, particularly if they fear being alone or have anxious attachment styles. This dependency makes them more vulnerable to manipulation, as the thought of losing the relationship feels more terrifying than enduring the manipulative behavior. Lack of education or awareness. Many people are simply not educated about what emotional manipulation looks like. They might recognize physical abuse, but struggle to identify the more subtle psychological forms of control, often dismissing them as personality quirks or relationship problems, rather than abuse. The disturbing implication is that individuals can spend years, even decades, in relationships where their emotional well-being is systematically undermined, their sense of self is destroyed, and their autonomy is stripped away, all without consciously labeling it as abuse or manipulation. They may feel chronically unhappy, anxious, or confused, but attribute these feelings to their own inadequacies, to the stress of life, or to the inherent difficulties of relationships, rather than to the deliberate actions of their partner. The long-term consequences of unnoticed emotional manipulation are severe, leading to chronic anxiety, depression, PTSD, a complete loss of self-worth, and an inability to trust future partners or even oneself. Breaking free requires not only recognizing the manipulation, but also rebuilding one's sense of self and reality, a process that often necessitates professional help. Understanding that emotional manipulation in relationships often goes unnoticed is a critical step towards protecting ourselves and others. It demands vigilance, self-awareness, and a willingness to trust our own instincts, even when a partner's words or actions attempt to sow doubt. The disturbing truth is that the most dangerous forms of control are often cloaked in affection and familiarity, making them invisible until their corrosive effects have already taken a profound toll on the victim's mind and spirit. 19. People may sabotage good relationships due to fear of intimacy. It's a perplexing and deeply frustrating pattern. Encountering someone who seems to have everything they could possibly want in a relationship, a loving, supportive, and genuinely compatible partner, only to witness them systematically dismantle it, often through self-destructive behaviors or seemingly irrational decisions. This disturbing psychological truth points to the powerful, often unconscious, influence of the fear of intimacy. For some individuals, the prospect of genuine emotional closeness, vulnerability, and deep connection is so terrifying that they will inadvertently or even deliberately sabotage good relationships, preferring the familiar discomfort or loneliness to the perceived threat of true intimacy. The fear of intimacy is not necessarily a fear of physical closeness, but rather a profound apprehension of emotional vulnerability, commitment, and the potential for emotional pain that deep connection entails. It often stems from early childhood experiences, particularly insecure attachment styles, as discussed in Topic 7. If an individual experienced abandonment, betrayal, or emotional neglect from primary caregivers, they may develop an internal working model that equates intimacy with pain, disappointment, or suffocation. They learn to protect themselves by keeping others at arm's length, even if they consciously crave connection. When such an individual finds themselves in a healthy, loving relationship that genuinely offers intimacy and security, their internal alarm system can be triggered. The very closeness they desire becomes a source of anxiety. Their subconscious mind, programmed to protect them from past hurts, perceives the growing intimacy as a threat rather than a gift. This triggers a range of self-sabotaging behaviors designed to create distance or end the relationship before they can be hurt again. These sabotaging behaviors can manifest in various ways. Creating distance. They might become emotionally unavailable, pull away physically, or suddenly become too busy when the relationship starts to deepen. Picking fights. They might instigate arguments over trivial matters, criticize their partner excessively, or provoke conflict to create emotional distance and justify withdrawal. Cheating or flirting. Engaging in infidelity or inappropriate flirting can be a subconscious way to push a partner away, test their loyalty, or ensure a backdoor escape from commitment. Self-destructive behaviors. They might engage in substance abuse, gambling, or other risky behaviors that strain the relationship and create conflict. Expressing doubts or dissatisfaction. Even when things are going well, they might voice persistent doubts about the relationship, question their partner's feelings, or express a vague sense of dissatisfaction, creating instability. Pushing away help. When their partner tries to address issues or offer support, they might reject it, further reinforcing their isolation. The disturbing aspect is that these actions are often not conscious attempts to hurt their partner or end the relationship. The individual may genuinely love their partner and desire the connection, but their subconscious fear of intimacy overrides their conscious intentions. They are caught in a painful paradox. They yearn for closeness, but are terrified of it, leading them to destroy the very thing they desire. They might experience intense guilt and confusion after sabotaging a good moment, but the underlying fear remains powerful. This behavior can be incredibly confusing and painful for the partner, who often struggles to understand why their loving efforts are met with resistance or destructive actions. They might blame themselves, believe they are not good enough, or feel profoundly betrayed, unaware that their partner is battling an internal, often unconscious, war with intimacy itself. The fear of intimacy also highlights the profound impact of past experiences on our present relationships. It underscores how deeply ingrained our psychological defenses can be, even when they actively work against our conscious desires for happiness and connection. The disturbing truth that people may sabotage good relationships due to fear of intimacy is a poignant reminder that love is not always enough to overcome deeply embedded psychological patterns. It reveals how our internal landscapes, shaped by our past, can become invisible barriers to the very happiness we seek, forcing us to destroy what we cherish most in a misguided attempt to protect ourselves from a perceived rather than actual threat of pain. 20. Jealousy stems more from insecurity than from love. Jealousy is often romanticized as a sign of deep love, a testament to how much one partner cares and fears losing the other. Popular culture frequently portrays it as a passionate, albeit volatile, expression of affection. However, the disturbing psychological truth is that while love can certainly be a context for jealousy, the emotion itself stems far more profoundly from personal insecurity, a lack of self-worth, and an underlying fear of abandonment. When jealousy becomes pervasive and destructive, it reveals less about the intensity of love and more about the fragility of the self. At its core, jealousy is a complex emotion that involves a blend of fear, anger, sadness, and anxiety. It typically arises when an individual perceives a threat to a valued relationship or to their own standing within that relationship. While a healthy, transient flicker of jealousy can sometimes serve as a signal that one values a partner and the relationship, chronic and intense jealousy is a pathological symptom of deeper psychological issues. The primary driver of destructive jealousy is often profound insecurity. An individual who lacks a strong sense of self-worth may believe they are not truly desirable, not good enough, or inherently replaceable. They project these insecurities onto their relationship, constantly fearing that their partner will find someone better or abandon them. This fear is not rooted in the partner's actions, though external triggers can certainly exacerbate it, but in the jealous individual's internal belief system about their own inadequacy. They use their partner's attention and affection as a constant source of validation, and any perceived threat to that attention feels like an existential threat to their self-esteem. The partner becomes an object to be controlled rather than a loved individual to be trusted, precisely because the jealous person does not trust their worthiness of love. Furthermore, jealousy is often linked to an anxious attachment style, as discussed in Topic 7. Individuals with anxious attachment styles often have a deep-seated fear of abandonment and an intense need for reassurance from their partners. They are highly sensitive to perceived threats to the relationship and interpret ambiguous cues negatively, fueling their jealousy. Their behavior, while seemingly about the partner, is actually a desperate attempt to regulate their own internal anxiety and secure the perceived love that their insecure self believes they might lose. The disturbing aspect of this truth is how jealousy, when framed as love, can become a powerful tool for manipulation and control within a relationship. A jealous partner might use their emotional outbursts or accusations as a means to isolate their partner, restrict their freedom, or demand constant attention, all under the guise of caring too much. The victim of such jealousy might internalize this narrative, believing that their partner's possessiveness is a sign of profound affection, rather than a symptom of insecurity and control. This can lead to a gradual erosion of the victim's autonomy, social life, and self-esteem, as they constantly try to appease their partner's irrational fears. The consequences of pervasive jealousy are devastating for both individuals. For the jealous person, it leads to a constant state of anxiety, suspicion, and emotional distress, preventing them from experiencing genuine peace or trust in their relationships. For the partner, it leads to feeling suffocated, distrusted, accused, and ultimately deeply unhappy. The relationship becomes a battleground of accusations and demands for reassurance, rather than a sanctuary of mutual respect and affection. Understanding that jealousy stems more from insecurity than from love is crucial for dismantling its destructive power. It encourages individuals to look inward, to address their own self-worth issues and fears of abandonment, rather than projecting them onto their partner. It also empowers individuals to recognize when jealousy is being weaponized as a form of control, rather than accepting it as a misguided expression of love. The disturbing truth is that what often masquerades as intense affection is in fact a painful manifestation of personal fear and inadequacy, holding both individuals hostage to a cycle of suspicion and emotional turmoil far removed from the liberating and trusting nature of genuine love. Thank you for joining us on this unsettling journey into the psychological undercurrents of love. By understanding these disturbing truths, we don't diminish the beauty of connection, but rather gain a clearer, more honest perspective on its complexities, allowing us to pursue and cultivate love with greater self-awareness, resilience, and genuine understanding.